Welcome to the section 2 of this course called Apollo GraphQL. And in this video we will get familiar with Apollo server. We will install all required packages for the Apollo server. We will take a look into a resolver map and resolver function signature in Apollo server. And at the end of the video we will run a few queries and mutations in the Apollo server playground. Okay, let's get started. The plan is to refactor our existing application car app HTTP to use Apollo server. So let's create a copy. And the next step is to install the dependencies. Apollo server requires Apollo server package and GraphQL. We already have GraphQL, but in case you're starting your project from scratch, Apollo server depends on GraphQL. So let's install those two. Now we have the packages installed. Let's open the index.js file and remove the first three imports. We don't need those. Also at the end of our file we had Express running, so we don't need that too. Let's delete that. Creating a basic Apollo server, it's pretty simple. We just need to import Apollo server and GQL function from Apollo server package. GQL is used to build our schema, and let's replace build schema with GQL function. The next step is to refactor our resolvers. The schema stays the same, there are no changes in the schema definition. In Apollo server we define the resolvers as one object that holds keys, and the keys are mapped to the schema types. This is known also as a resolver map. Before we actually implement the resolver map, let's take a look how it's defined. In an object called resolvers, we can define a key called query and mutation. Those are the building ones. We can also define our user-defined types. Back to the code, let's replace our resolver function with a resolver map, a object with keys, query, the GraphQL building type query, a mutation, that's also building GraphQL type. We also added car, our own type, and under each key we define methods. Those are our resolvers, and each resolver takes 4 arguments. Let's take a look how they are used. The first one is the parent argument. The arguments are positioned, which means the order is important. And the parent is an object that is returned from the parent resolver and is passed down to the next child resolver. Let's take a look into this example and visualize how parent argument is passed from parent resolver to a child resolver. In this example, cars by ID is our query. Cars by ID resolver gets executed on the backend, and ID gets passed to every single type which is backed by a resolver function. So this ID gets passed as an argument to every single child resolver. Okay, on the second position is the Args argument, which is an object that we're passing to our queries or mutations. In this example, cars by ID takes argument ID, and on our resolver side is translated to ID as an object. And on the third position we have the context argument, which is shared between all the resolvers, and it's passed by the server on every execution. And the final argument is the info argument, which you can get information about the execution state. We can see the return type, the parent type, also the operation type of the resolver, query, mutation. Back to the code, our final step is to create a Apollo server instance. We are passing 2 arguments, type definitions, which is our schema, and the resolvers, which is our resolver map. And at the end we are saying server listen. If we don't provide a port, it will default to 4000, and let's execute it. And right now our server is ready and listens port 4000. Apollo server also comes with a playground, which is extension of the original GraphQL browser IDE. You can also execute queries, investigate your schema, pass variables. You can create multiple tabs and execute queries and mutations side by side.